I am thrilled to welcome to the podcast today Julia Bergson-Chilcock and Mike Hilbert, co-founders of Cupola Academy, a secular learning community in Malvern, Pennsylvania, serving young people ages 4 to 18. Julia and Mike facilitate part-time in-person programs that support homeschooling families who want something more holistic than school and something more community-based than going it alone. Julia and Mike, welcome to the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity.
It's so great to have you here. We met a while back when I was writing my unschooled book that came out in 2019, and then we had a chance to meet again in person recently after the publication of my newest book, Joyful Learning. And I'm just thrilled to have you on the podcast to share your founder story and really your experience over decades in unconventional education more broadly. And Julia, maybe it's worth starting with you because you were a lifelong homeschooler, unschooler, didn't set foot into a traditional classroom until college and had just a great experience there. And largely that was due to your parents who were, pioneers in the alternative education movement, highly influenced in the 1960s by John Holt, the revolutionary educator and author who coined the term unschooling and supported homeschooling families for many years through a variety of initiatives, including his newsletter for homeschooling families called Growing Without Schooling and his many, many books on particularly unschooling and self-directed education. So, Julia, maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of your family's background and your experience as a self-directed learner.
Sure. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Kerry. So, as you mentioned, John Holt was definitely a key voice for both my parents and for myself, although I was very young. Some of my earliest memories are of time spent with John Holt, and he
Mm.
was certainly very formative in our family's educational philosophy. My parents worked to create an educational environment for not only my two older sisters, myself, and my younger brother, but for a whole community of learners starting in the 1970s. And what was unique at that point was that many of the families who were drawn towards alternative education at that time were either choosing to come to it for conservative Christian values or
Mm.
on the other end of the spectrum, kind of radical underground homeschooling. And certainly respect either of those extremes. And our family and my parents were choosing to come to this type of education because they really valued using the world as our classroom. They wanted to spend time with us. They were not wanting to put us on a school bus and send us away 5 days a week. And they saw that there was so much natural learning that was happening from starting when we were born and infants and learning to crawl and then walk and talk, and how much intrinsic motivation really drives a young person. And so they went on to found an organization called Open Connections, which my parents led until my mom's death from complications from rheumatoid arthritis in 2005. And then my dad went to shift from his role of director in 2007, at which point Mike and I took over leadership until 2020. And then we took the key components of that approach to education and started Cupola Academy in January of 2021.
It's great. Yes, wonderful sort of backstory there and the sort of the inspiration from your family and really the work that your parents did in creating probably one of the first sort of hybrid homeschools or micro schools that it's just amazing to see how much the movement has grown since the 1960s and 1970s and what was probably very unique then is now so commonplace and so sought after by so many more families. So just exciting to hear that backstory. I'll also note here that Mike and Julia, you are both married and you're the parents to three lifelong homeschoolers and Cupola Academy young people who are 16, 14, and 11. So now as parents, you are inviting your children, your young people into this world of self-directed education with a partnership through Cupola Academy. So, Mike, let's hear a little bit more about your background. You, after college, joined the AmeriCorps program City Year. You taught in the Philadelphia public school system and were, involved in sort of conventional public education for a while until switching over to unconventional education and homeschooling, both as an educator and a founder, but also as a parent of students who learn in a self-directed environment. I wonder if you can share a little bit about your background and what kind of attracted you to alternative education models.
Yeah, I had a very quote unquote traditional educational path. I went to Villanova University for my undergrad, and then I participated in the AmeriCorps program City Year, which got me into the Philadelphia public school system. I found just a love of working with young people. I went and got my master's, became a certified teacher in social studies in the state of Pennsylvania. And then family friends connected me to Julia's family, and I was kind of blown away. I didn't know that that type of education existed. And what I really loved about what Peter and Susan were doing was just the idea that you had the freedom and flexibility to customize your young person's education. And they focused on the collaborative piece that I felt was just
Mm,
so vital to their growth and development. So being able to work together, focus on the process of how we learn versus what we learn. Um, and those were the elements that really drew me to it. And I was fortunate enough to work with Susan for a few months before she passed away and helped me develop my process consciousness skills. And it really hooked me at that point. And I thought, well, this is the way that I want my young people to learn, and this is what I want to devote my life to, is creating a more holistic way of educating young people.
yeah, and I want to spend a lot of time talking about your founder journey with Cupola Academy, but just kind of lingering a bit more on this historical context and just all of the unschoolers, homeschoolers, self-directed learners that you worked with over years at Open Connections. Some people often wonder, what about outcomes, right? How do these kids turn out? And when they're learning in an unconventional environment, particularly one in which there's so much autonomy, so much personal agency allowed for young people. What do you say to those folks, those questioners who can't imagine that young people can be successful if they're not kind of directly instructed in a top-down way?
Sure, that's an excellent question and one we obviously get from a lot of prospective families,
Mm,
right? Because parents, of course, want the best for their young people, and choosing an educational path is a key component to thinking about kind of looking down the road. What do you want your young person to become? What personality traits? How can you instill those? And therefore, what educational environment will be best to kind of tap into their strengths and their gifts. And so to speak to your question about kind of the longevity and for
mm,
young people who go on this path either all the way through, or families who find this maybe during the middle school years or high school years,
mm,
what our alumni repeatedly share with us is the opportunity that they were respected and trusted by adult facilitators, but also the ability to be stretched outside of their comfort zone. So, our belief at Cupola is that young people learn best when they are co pilots in their education. And so what that means is that they have a level of autonomy and a voice in what they learn and how they learn it. And that is also balanced with exposure to we use the term facilitator rather than teacher,
Mm,
facilitator initiated activities and experiences that will often open their eyes to content or people or resources or materials that they might not even know are out there, that it had existed had they just kind of been entirely self-directed. And so we really find that striking the balance, and what the alumni share is that they had a level of ownership over their education and that they worked in a collaborative environment, and that those are skills that really have served them well as they transition to college and then after college into the workforce.
mm,
Obviously, the oldest young people who have been through my family's programs are now in their 50s,
yeah.
older than me. Um, and so it's really interesting to hear what a profound impact caring adults, and as Mike spoke briefly earlier about what we refer to as our process consciousness,
Yeah.
and that what an impact that can have. Really, the attention to detail that we pay to how we speak to young people, even using the term young person rather than kid or child, that is a very conscious choice on our part, really respecting them as individuals, giving them a voice in their education. They then go on to a more traditional educational environment when they transition to a traditional four-year college, and they have a level of confidence that many of their traditionally schooled peers don't have. And they have that love of learning
Mm,
because they have been allowed to follow their own interests. It's not the empty vessel waiting to be filled, but really a young person who has the ability to explore their interests and their passions.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add on was we don't have a grading system here because we believe in meaningful feedback. And so
mm,
it is not that young people then are living in a vacuum where there's no feedback or ways to improve or what was done well, it kind of is given, but that they get meaningful ways to grow and develop. And that the young people that I have spoken with, that we have had come through our alumni, say time and time again that that feedback really helped them develop their level of learning, and they were able to seamlessly transition into a more traditional graded system that they felt was more gamified than it was trying to actually serve a purpose. Um, when we enter the working world or when you enter traditional education, usually it's does it work or does it not work, versus this was an A, this was a B type of paper, and that kind of collaborative working towards a goal environment was much more beneficial to them is kind of the feedback that I hear from a traditional standpoint.
mhm. So I love that. And I think it just shows that all college and career pathways are open to unconventionally educated children, young people. And that I love your term of co-piloting in education and really coming alongside the learner. I think that that's such an important visual that we can have. So you decided to go off on your own and become founders in 2021 instead of just sort of inheriting that experience of running an unconventional learning environment. You went off on your own to create Cupola Academy, which is located on a 10-acre property in Malvern, Pennsylvania. I wonder if you can share a little bit about what it was like in that kind of launch period. What were some of the challenges and rewards of those sort of initial launch months?
Sure. Um, I would certainly speak to the having an established name in the field, our family's longevity, that certainly helped us as, yes, we are founders and
Mm,
we weren't totally new to the field. And
yeah.
so when we were in a transitional period and we didn't have a dedicated space, we were very fortunate that we had some incredible donors that were supporting the vision of Cupola Academy and helping us as we were looking for a permanent location. We had a number of longtime staff members from my parents' previous organization who followed us, as well as a number of families. And so we weren't starting completely from scratch. I would say we had lessons learned from our previous organization
Mm,
and experiences, and we were able to take the components that were authentic to my parents' vision and then bring our own kind of flavor and taste to Cupola that was reflective of the 21st century, of the time that we're growing in. And even that, we're constantly growing and adapting as things continue to change. I would say one of the biggest challenges was finding a location. We
always a challenge.
we
Yeah.
had a very clear vision. We often joke that we should have a mascot as a unicorn because what we're
Mhm.
looking for is very unique because we wanted to be accessible to public transportation. We draw from a wide geographical area. We have families from the suburbs of Philadelphia. We have families who come from Montgomery, Delaware, Chester counties, and from Philadelphia. So we wanted to be accessible to a wide geographical area, but we also wanted to have a nice nature component to our organization because we view the world as our classroom and because the natural world is such a wonderful kind of blank canvas that lends itself to so many real world learning opportunities. That was really key to us in looking for a location. So it did take us a good 3 years to find this, and I would say um, if you aren't truly passionate about this type of education, it is not for the faint of heart. You have to believe in it wholeheartedly. You have to be committed to your principles and your value systems and your sense of integrity, while at the same time being open to stepping stones.
Mm.
And as somebody who is not a patient person, I am fortunate to be married to somebody who is good at helping me pull back and realize that Rome wasn't built in a day, as he always reminds me. And so my advice to people who are starting out
Mm.
on this path, if they are starting their own micro school, pod, learning center, or for a family, maybe they're not starting their own place, but for your listeners who are just embarking on an alternative education journey, it is to be resilient, to be flexible, to be open to possibilities that might be different than you initially thought, and to create and adjust constantly. That you are not signing up and saying, this is how it's always going to be, but this is our reality right now. And let's do the best we can with that. And then continually create and adjust.
Yeah, I would I would say Julia is very much the product of a self-directed educational model because she sets her sights on a goal and will seek to achieve it no matter what is put in her way. She does not see systems as any kind of an obstacle, just a way to work around them. Um, I will share, I think, knowing Peter and Susan and the journey that they went on in their long history in self-directed education, I felt like we were walking in their footsteps a little bit because Peter would tell me stories and I would be like, that's like the borderline between like just daring brilliance and, like extreme sacrifice. And when Jules and I knew the cupola was growing, and we had a lovely partnership with Riverbend Environmental Education Center here in the Philadelphia area, where they allowed us to use their space a couple of days a week. And when we were looking for a new forever home for CA, we just knew we had to continue to have a place that we could just call home, that we could put our things in, that our community could gather in. And we had to make a decision whether Julie and I were going to make a big personal sacrifice. And if you want to do something that is not frequently done, you usually have to do something that is not frequently done. And so the for us to personally invest in a property, because
Mm,
as a nonprofit, in a practical side here, getting a loan for a nonprofit, at least many of the bank doors that I knocked on were were not amicable to that.
mm,
So um, we had to have a lot of conviction, and I would say for us that was the easier part, was that from our backgrounds we wholeheartedly believed and were able to kind of like push our retirement chips into finding a new home for CA very quickly. Um, and I was always appreciative of Julia's equal conviction in that. I think that's one of our strengths, is that we're both like wholeheartedly believe and enter into this with, no regrets or reservations.
so great. So you now have 50 learners in your Cupola Academy community. Tell us a little bit about how the program works. It's a part-time program, so you don't have full-time options. Everyone is considered legally a homeschooler. How does Cupola Academy work with families? What is the kind of typical weekly structure like?
Sure, great question. So, we are very conscious about the part-time nature of our programs. And again, that is because we see the value add that Cupola can bring to a family. We refer to this type of education as partnership education.
Mm,
And so, what we mean by that is that we are working in partnerships with the families, and they are working in partnership with Cupola to create a holistic, engaging educational experience for their young person. For each family who belongs to Cupola, that looks a little bit different. For a family who is leaving a high stakes private school or coming out of a traditional 5 day week public school and making this transition, the amount of hand holding that they will want and need is very different from a family who's been part of Cupola for a number of years and are comfortable with the legalities of what you need to do to comply with PA home education law.
mm,
We are able to offer that support for families. And so, yes, their young people attend in-person programs at Cupola 2 to 3 days a week. But we also help those families design what their days look like when they're not at Cupola, if they would like that support. So that's not required. And again, you'll see a mixture within our community, those who are newer to this type of education. We are sitting with them and we are helping them fill out their paperwork the first time that they're submitting to their school district to comply with PA home education law. We are helping them craft their educational objectives. We are offering what about portfolio workshops? And then in the later years, just last week, we had our panel of paths and creating a transcript as a homeschooled high schooler and what that looks like. We have a number of community events, field trips, workshops. So we really can serve as a one-stop shop for families in creating that partnership education experience. I'll let Mike speak to kind of what a typical day looks like for some of the young people in particular during our high school years, since that's his area of expertise and who he works with.
Yeah, so it's a typical day on campus. Uh, Let me rewind to say our year kind of begins. The teenagers meet in the summer with their facilitators to figure out what are the topics, what are the skills that are important to them that year. How do we want to cover it? It really is a partnership in the sense that we're co-creating our content and our skill development for the year. So um, then we'll start, if you were, it's very project based in the sense, if you looked at our Tuesday as an example, we might spend the morning. We have a old pool that we are turning into a viable ecosystem here on campus. And so they are hands-on in this pool, surveying biological life, taking water quality readings, and talking about the plants that they're going to plant in the springtime to really turn this into a much more healthy ecosystem.
Mm.
In the afternoon, you could be doing a range of different projects that might be humanities or literature based, everything from the reading of Macbeth to we might be talking about financial literacy and or exploring. We have a theme that they wanted to explore revolutions. So we're talking about the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, all different kind of pieces that are created with them in mind. And in between those two, kind of like I break us into an afternoon and a morning session, but in between there, we have our lunch and group game looks a little bit different in the fact that it's collaborative games mixing between team building, some non-traditional sports, but we also spend a lot of time outdoors on the 10-acre campus, as Julia said. We try to do as much environmental education as possible, and even adjacent projects, and just going to talk about a longstanding project that we've had that was initiated by two alums, but have now passed it down to younger members of the community. And that's our plastic recycling program. So the quick version of this is they're really concerned with the environmental effects of plastic, wanted to find a small scale solution to plastic recycling, reached out to another organization, Precious Plastics, with open source machinery. We ended up buying plastic recycling machines, coordinating with a local makerspace to store the machines, hiring outside facilitators, help them teach them about material science, and then doing community outreach to collect plastic, turn it into viable products, and create a small scale recycling solution to plastic that these two alum were able to then hand down to younger members of the community. But it's just an example of how youth created content on projects can come to life and then have a longevity beyond even their time here at Cupola.
Mm. So exciting. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the families who might want or need some more hand-holding, particularly if they're coming out of a conventional classroom environment into alternative education. What are some of the ways that you help support those families on the days when their young people are not at Cupola?
Sure. So I would say usually our experience is that the young people make the switch, so to speak, faster than the parent or parents. Um, because usually most of the parents have been traditionally schooled all along. And so even though there might be something in their gut telling them this isn't the best way to do it, it's what they're used to. And so it's kind of the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And so stepping outside into something new can feel overwhelming. So again, coming back to our longevity in the field, that can be reassuring to families. My parents helped write the law to make homeschooling become legal in Pennsylvania back in the 1980s. So we are very familiar with the nuances of the homeschooling law in Pennsylvania, and it's nowhere near as challenging as some people make it out to be. It really is pretty straightforward, but for somebody brand new to it, they do want that support and that reassurance. I would say the biggest kind of support we can give to families is, as I said, helping the parents flip that switch of being able to see that learning can happen anytime and that it does not have to be confined to a traditional classroom with a teacher, memorization, and regurgitation. But really, the most valuable learning is when a young person is invested in what they are doing. they can see the direct application for why they will need to develop this skill. And when they have the freedom, but freedom within boundaries, right? So it's not complete freedom, but that balance of being held accountable. And Mike talked to, while we don't have grades at Cupola, we do have a lot of group project-based work where each member within that group has a component that they need to complete for a whole group experience. And some of that happens during program time, but some of, to your point, what do their days look like when they're not at Cupola?
Yeah.
Some of that is continuing on of Cupola projects. Some of it is connecting them with our vast network of alumni or community partners that we've established with local businesses and
Mm.
organizations. So that a young person might say, I'm really interested in makerspace and technology. And then we connect them with Fluxspace, where we have a community partnership, and they are able to shadow and have an internship there. And then it turns into something that they are now pursuing in college after graduating from Cupola. So it's really being a source of reassurance. And then from a concrete perspective, being able to help families connect with other um, engaging adult mentors for their young people, or even peer mentors. We have two new teens, one longtime homeschooler and one brand new to homeschooling, but both of them new to Cupola. And one of them is now mentoring, facilitating a math tutoring with his peer. And so it doesn't have to look like a traditional, you go to a tutoring center and you are taught by an adult. The peer-to-peer learning for some young people can really be compelling and a draw there. But it's the outside kind of support and the reassurance that we can provide parents and connecting them with alumni who come back and speak, because we can say everything, but really it's our alumni when they sit in front of an audience of teens and parents, and they are articulate, they are well spoken, they are able to point to the skills that they developed at Cupola and the process consciousness and the collaboration and the value of what we call applied academics and how that's serving them well now in their college years or grad school or in their profession. That is really, I think, what can set us apart and can help ease those fears of parents is when they see a young adult up there, or they just come to campus and they see young people who are happy and engaged and who look them in the eye and say, "Oh, hi, I don't know who you are," and they stick their hand out and to shake the hand of a new parent. Many of our prospective families are really struck by
Mm.
how, as one parent described it, how alive in their bodies the young people are here.
Mm.
And I thought that that was a really nice way of articulating the types of young people who thrive at Cupola are those who want to be here and who are alive in their bodies.
I love that. Both of you have been in the alternative education space for a long time doing this work. What have you noticed has changed, especially over, say, the last 5 or 10 years? Where is your sense of this movement towards unconventional learning spaces? Has it come from and where is it going?
Why don't you start, since I tend to talk more, and then I'll chime in.
Um, so, I mean, to me, my time frame being a little shorter than Julia's when I say 20 years, um, I notice just the number of options has exponentially increased in terms. I think one of the things that we do really well is connect to a lot of like-minded organizations who want to help young people learn, grow, and develop in different ways. And those organizations were not in this space 10 years ago.
Mm,
Um, the Flux Spaces of the world, the Bryn Mawr Film Institutes, the outreach to, what I'd call homeschoolers has increased significantly.
mm,
And the different forms of education that are out there have increased significantly. Um, and so from that point, when Jules is talking about how do we support families, sometimes it can be a paralysis of so many options. What do you recommend? I don't even know where to start. The list is too long. Like, how do I manage this? We can help create a more curated list of like-minded places that we feel might match with their young person's passion, their own family, kind of beliefs and goals and the path that they want to walk. Um, so that's the first thing when you ask that question that struck me is like, is the just the number of people choosing this and the number of options that are out there are just they're so vast and there's so much more.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that, it's interesting to look at education as we know it from a historical perspective, right? And that education as most people choose to approach it, fewer now, more stepping into a more alternative paradigm. But traditional school is not a has not been around that long. 150 years ago, there was one room schoolhouse and there were vertical age groupings and young people were helping with farming. They were doing chores and it was only, historically, relatively recently that compulsory schooling came to be front and center and the idea of kind of a mandated curriculum and a set of tools or skills that you need. And I think something that has changed is especially the shift started to happen when the internet became so prevalent. And that was, I think, the first major disruptor
mm,
to traditional education, because no longer could somebody make the case that you need to know all of the presidents in order and that you should spend 2 weeks in your civics class learning that, or your history class learning that. Because you had this amazing thing, the internet, where you could type in and in zero point 0.2 seconds, you have the order of the presidents right in front of you. And so I think it brings it back to what, kind of full circle, John Holt, and the true test of intelligence is not how much we know how to do, but how we behave when we don't know what to do.
mm.
That's a quote that's widely attributed to John Holt. There isn't a specific date or place that he said it, but that is a quote that is often attributed to him. And I think he was so ahead of his time
Yeah.
because with the internet and then now more recently with AI and ChatGPT, we don't know the skills that young people who are school aged right now will need in 10 years or even 5 years. And so it's being able to know what are the skills, not specific content, but again, the process side of things, being able to collaborate, being able to engage in thoughtful dialogue with somebody who has a different perspective than you. How important are those skills right now to be able to truly hear and listen to somebody who has a different perspective? And you don't need to necessarily agree, but to be able to listen and respond respectfully or be even more steadfast in your own value sets. Those are components of an education and really a life that we want to help young people develop. It's not, do you know how to do higher level math? Are you in, Calc A, B, Calc B, C? Yes, those are valuable skills depending on your desired next steps or profession. But being able to communicate effectively, being able to collaborate, and being able to think critically and be a creative problem solver, regardless of what field you go into, or regardless of how our society and world continues to change and evolve, are skills that are going to serve young people well.
Completely agree. So, as we begin to wrap up, I'd love to hear your response to parents who might be really excited by what you're offering, might really be attracted to the idea of alternative education, but it's just so hard for them to make that leap. And I wonder if you could sort of generalize, conversations you've had with prospective families over the years to kind of my audience that includes, obviously founders and prospective founders, but also many, many parents who are interested in alternative education, particularly these new emerging schooling models and new micro schools and hybrid schools like yours that are cropping up all across the country. They like what they hear. They like this model of unconventional education. But gosh, to make that leap can seem really intimidating. What advice do you have for those families?
Can I start? Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. Um, I say it's the same advice you'd probably give to a young person trying a new task.
Hmm.
Be brave. You can do it. People will help you. Anytime that we send our young people into the world, anytime that they make a new foray, they try out for a sports team, they go to something they haven't tried before. They are the same as us as adults. We're trying something we haven't tried before. And what do? We look to people that may have walked that path before. We ask for advice. We ask for help. What's worked well for you? Be brave. Speaking as someone who walked a traditional path myself, um, the rewards that you can reap from your young person getting this experience to advocate for themselves, to plan for themselves, the intrinsic motivation within their learning, it multiplies itself exponentially as they continue their lives. And the resources, the number of people that have walked this, there are more now than there were when Julia started. And we know we have the evidence that it can be successful. Now, I can always just point to my wife uh,
Hmm.
and
Very
say,
good evidence.
it's excellent evidence that the amount she can accomplish and her collaborative skills, uh, I would say if we can, you know, and I would put up many of our alumni. We just
Yeah.
had my back from college to speak, and I feel like I don't need to say anything more than just have a conversation with our alum, and it becomes very clear that if this is something you're interested in, if you're considering it, be brave, take the leap. We can help.
And then I would balance that for if people hearing that and it's still just that I
Mm,
can't take that full leap, right? How to start small. What are little ways that you can start building in this educational philosophy into your daily lives while your young people are still in school?
mm,
And so it might be something as little as making a conscious effort to go on a family hike. And then, as the parent, when you get home, jot down what are some of the skills that you and your young person developed by going on that hike, right? Taking some of those hands-on life learning experiences and start putting it into school terms, if you will.
yeah.
That can help ease the fear of parents, right? Because parents ultimately, they just want to know that their young person is going to be happy, healthy, and I would say intellectually engaged, right? So I think starting small, and then, as Mike said, for those who are ready to kind of have that leap of faith and look to trusted mentors, other people who have walked the walk before can be incredibly reassuring. Read, learn as much as you can, model being intellectually curious. We'll have parents who will say, I just wish my young person would read. And
I don't
I will say, do they see you reading? Well, no, I don't have time to. Well, like let us all model the types of behaviors and how we want our own young people. We should be modeling that ourselves in our own lives.
I love that. Such great advice. Were you going to say something, Mike?
I only had one thing as a
Yeah.
nostalgic parent. And my kids will say I always cry every time that I talk about them. But you have your young people kind of with you for such a short period of time in my mind. And it goes so fast,
Yeah.
the long days, short years. Um, but that for me as a parent, what, was the ceiling deal was like spending more time with my young people. And it's not that it's always like roses and puppy dogs all the time, but I too keep the big picture in mind that really with them living with you, you have 18 years. Um, and it goes by so fast. This way, I think, is a paradigm shift from the idea of I know that I have uh, a deeper relationship with my young people than had they gone through traditional school.
Mm.
That we have just more time, more experiences. I know them better. I have the opportunity to know them better, and I'm just so thankful for that.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience and your founder story with Cupola Academy. If my listeners and viewers want to learn more about Cupola Academy, follow your journey, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure, they can go to our website, which is cupolaacademy.org, CUPOLAACADEMY.org. They can call us at 610-255-7188 or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn, just at Cupola Academy.
Incredible. Well, so great to connect with you both. And Julia and Mike, thanks so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Really appreciate it,
Thank
Carrie.
you,
Have a
Kerry. It's
wonderful
great to
day.
talk with you again.